back to another day of MSU Outreach Week. You're all very welcome, as always. Today we're very lucky enough to have a panel along to answer some of the questions which you've been submitting throughout the week. So we're going to get some of those questions answered now. So just before we start, I'm going to start with a quick word of prayer. Dear God, Lord, I just thank you for another day of MSU Outreach Week, Lord. I thank you for bringing each of these people here. And I just ask that you be with the panel today as they're answering the questions, give them the words to know what to say and the answers, and just bless us through the rest of this week. We ask all this in your name. Amen. Okay. So, first of all, I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves before we get started.
James Farmer, I'm a full-time youth worker at High Street Methodist.
Nigel McCullough, I'm minister in Hill Street Presbyterian in Lurgan.
I'm doing now, and I study theology at Queen's in Belfast.
Okay, now, our first question is, how can we be 100% sure that the Bible is authentic and relevant?
It really doesn't work for you.
Yeah, it's just me. I'll just project my voice. We'll start with James.
Okay. Great question. Sorry, we're in and out. There it is. Great question. Two things really are being asked here. You're asking about the authenticity and the relevance. So we'll start with the authenticity. Personally, I take a lot of encouragement from something like the finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Some of you might have heard of that in RE. So back in 1947, a fella stumbled across a cave in the desert, and in the cave was a whole load of preserved manuscripts, and about 230 biblical manuscripts. So copies of every book of the Hebrew Bible, apart from Esther, and they found a complete scroll of Isaiah, book of Isaiah. And that scroll alone was 1,000 years older than any of the ancient scriptures that we have copies of. So it's an amazing find. And what was amazing about it was the books that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls on the papyrus and the parchment were the same text as the books that we read today. It wasn't like a different version, it was the same. So that's super encouraging. That's 1,000 years, well, much more older than that, several thousand years old, this piece of parchment. And if I was to read Isaiah on that parchment, it's the same as if I was to read Isaiah in this book here. So in terms of authenticity, can I trust it? Has it been changed? Has it been doctored over the years? The finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls show me that they haven't, and it's a really big encouragement. Why keep going? Do you want to do New Testament?
Yeah, I'll do it. We can fit off each other here a wee bit. That's really, really helpful. I was going to think a wee bit about the life of Jesus. Sometimes people sort of say, well, the Bible just makes arguments for itself. I think those arguments are very consistent, which are very important. But if you look at the life of Jesus, we have from external sources, so not biblical sources, but Jewish historians, Roman historians, so people like Josephus and Tacitus and Suetonius, and you put together the things that they say about Jesus. We know that there was somebody called Jesus who lived. We know that he lived during the time that Pontius Pilate was governor. We know that he was crucified, and we know that his followers worshipped him as God. Now in very broad brushstrokes, that is essentially the heart of what the New Testament tells us. And therefore, we can look at these stories about Jesus and say, well, actually, these are telling us about something that other people attest. Then there's also something about the internal consistency. So one of the things that people often say is, well, it's surely just the early church or the first Christians made up the stories about Jesus just to make themselves look good. And I think that falls down for a couple of reasons. First of all, because as we read about the disciples in the Gospels, for example, they don't look good, they look pretty stupid most of the time. And certainly, whenever I write stories about myself, I'm always the hero. Do you ever find that? They just didn't do that. They were the ones who never got it, didn't quite understand, and so on. So there's a ring of truth about it. And the second thing we can say about that is these guys who wrote down what purport to be eyewitness accounts of what happened to Jesus, the fact that he died and rose again, they didn't just, it wasn't as if they were sitting in the pub and they thought, well, we'll make up these stories here and it'll be good fun. Each one of them actually ended up dying for the things that they were claiming to be true. All but one of them who ended up in exile. So there was real personal commitment and cost. And certainly, probably, we wouldn't be above making up a story just to see how it went. But if it was going to cost us that much, I think we would soon come clean. And so these guys seem to genuinely have believed that what they saw was real, and that it really did transform them, and they staked their whole lives on it. So that for me is very, very important. And that helps us, I think, with the authenticity issue. It's saying this is something that we've got to take seriously. And if it is authentic, if it's real, then because of what it claims, by definition, it is real.
Yeah, I think you guys pretty much covered it. I would just maybe add that, as well as that, if you look at the fact that the Bible was written over 2,000-3,000 years by over 40 different people, realising that with 66 books, they were not intended until about 5 or 6 hundred years ago to be one collection, that there are no contradictions. Some people claim there are, and there are certainly things that are difficult to interpret at times, but there are threads that run the whole way through 66 books, all written over a very long period of time in many, many different literary genres, with prophecies in the Old Testament that happened in the New, with prophecies in the New that are happening today. And it's all there in front of you. I think gives the Bible a significant integrity.
Okay, our second question is God inside time or outside time? Michael?
Yeah, this is one of these head-itching questions. I think the picture that we get is that God is outside of time, is above time. And one of the helpful illustrations I've heard of this is that for us, we're in time. We're obviously it's like sailing down a river on a boat, and we're only able to see one part of the river all of the time. But God is sort of standing above the river, and He's able to see all the twists and turns. And actually, it's as if time is sort of spread out around Him like a carpet, like sort of you guys sitting on the floor. And so He's able to be as present with something that was happening 1,000 years ago as He is present today and present tomorrow. And therefore, time doesn't seem to be really an issue. Time doesn't really seem to be an issue for Him. And therefore, all of that stuff about being in control and knowing where things are going becomes very straightforward for God.
God is inside and outside of time. He's outside because you look at the first book of the Old Testament. Maybe we'll just do away with that. We look at the first book of the Old Testament and we find this creation story of a God who exists before anything else. And some of the first things we see Him doing is creating sun and moon, separating day from night, and in essence He's creating time. Passing of day and night. He's before time, so in that sense He's outside of it. And there are a couple of scriptures that come to mind with this question. Psalm 90 says that for God, 1,000 years is like the passing of yesterday to us. And that's a theme that Peter picks up on in the New Testament. In 2 Peter 3, he says, a day is like 1,000 years to the Lord, and 1,000 years like a day. So He's above time. But what's astonishing is, in the incarnation, the coming of Jesus, He was willing to step into the scene of time, which is incredible. If you think that God is above time, He creates time, He's above it all. In Jesus, we have Emmanuel, God with us, the exact representation of God's being,
God on display, if you like, for us to understand. That makes the coming of Christ incredible. Because in Jesus we see one who is God, but who was willing to subject himself to time, to the passing of days, to growing. He was an infant, he had to grow. That's incredible. That means God is so humble, and he must love us so much that he would be willing to step into time. Incredible, incredible. Inside and out.
I think that's good. Yeah,
Okay, question 3 is, why do people think Christians are hypocrites? Andrew, we'll start with you.
There's an easy answer to that, and there's a more difficult one. People think that Christians are hypocrites, probably because we are. It's the simplest answer to that. So they see the whole, you preach about this, you talk about this, and then you don't do it. And that is absolutely true. There are things that we fall significantly short of, in the very fact that we're human. We will not be completely perfect and Christ-like until we meet him. And really all I can say is that, for a start, as a Christian, I apologise to those of you that are not Christians on behalf of the Christian community, because we do fail to meet the mark that Christ set, and we're willing to admit that. But what I would say is that perhaps the flaw in your thinking is, well, the clue's kind of in the name, Christian. Don't look at us. It's Christ that you should really take your modelling from, as far as what a Christian should be, because that's what we do. And the fact that of everything that he has done for us. So if there's somebody who uses that as an excuse for why Christianity is wrong or bad or not for me, I'll consider you just shift focus slightly to Christ and use him as the starting mark. I'm not covered just in that.
Yeah, I think what Andrew says is absolutely right. But it's true for us all. We all have aspirations that we try to live by, and we all fall short of them. We ever will, whether we're Christians or not. And I think actually one of the things that's interesting is that it does underline something that's very important about Christians, and that is that we're not considered right with God because we're good. Do you know? Sometimes that's the inference behind the questions. You know that you're claiming to be this and yet you're not. But part of the reason that Christians are Christians is because they know that they're not good. They know that they fall short, and so they actually need somebody from outside of themselves. They look to a saviour. And in my experience, most people who are Christians are very quick to admit that. I think actually, we would probably say that very, very quickly. That we know that we're not good. And often it's those who are not Christians who are the people who are saying, I've led a good life. Just 2 conversations yesterday and this morning with 2 different people. One, a man who's just started to get involved in church and he's not yet a Christian, and he's saying, I really think I've led quite a good life. And that's very typical, I think, of a lot of people who are saying, I'm not quite sure why I need this. I find myself drawn to it, but I don't really know that I need it. Whereas this morning I was chatting to somebody who's a Christian who's just so aware of the fact that they fall short and they're full of faults and failings. And I think it's whenever we actually do see what real Christianity is, then we give up that pretense of saying, I'm great and I've got it all sorted. And we're saying, I know that I'm flawed and I'm broken, and that's why I need Jesus.
Question 4 is, does the character of God of the Old Testament not contradict the God of the New Testament? James?
Okay. Most of the time when a question like that is asked, we're probably thinking of an event in the Old Testament where maybe the Israelite army or God himself has routed some of the nation's enemies. And when we're talking about the New Testament, often when we're thinking in a question like this of Jesus maybe saying something like, turn the other cheek. And so you might look at the two and think, hang on a minute, what's going on? I suppose at the heart of this question is probably something like, can a display of God's wrath coexist with a display of God's mercy. Isn't that a contradiction? And it's not actually, because God, both wrath and mercy are part of God's character. The punishment of sin and incredible gracious mercy, they're both to be found in God. So it's not a contradiction. And if you're a Christian today, I really want to encourage you to be humble and to approach God as your Father, as Jesus teaches us to do, and to trust that He is right. To trust that His call, His act in each and every situation is right. And sometimes that will be difficult. Sometimes you're going to have to figure a few things out, or how do I properly interpret this? But basically what I'm saying is whatever you see God doing is the right call. We're never going to reach a place where we're going to say, actually, you dropped the ball there, God, and I think you should have done it. That's never going to happen. Let's trust Him as our Father and realise that whatever He does is right. His dealings with the nation of Israel in the Old Testament are peculiar to that nation. And when we see Jesus, He's giving us commands for all people everywhere. So there's two different things there. That's all I would say. Pass on.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of a misunderstanding of what's actually going on in the Bible, because in the Old Testament we do see both, as James was saying, both God's wrath, His holiness, His anger expressed against what's wrong, and we see His great mercy and love. And actually, in the New Testament we see that in Jesus as well, because we see Jesus' great compassion, but we also see Jesus talking about judgment, warning us, telling us about hell. Nobody spoke more about hell than Jesus. So actually what happens is that from the New Testament, from the Old Testament to the New Testament, both the love of God is magnified and the wrath of God is magnified. And if Jesus, the most loving person who ever walked this earth, talks about both of those things, then those are both things we need to take seriously.
I think we'll finish up there. If we just want to give a round of applause, this is a thank you.